Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Beyond the Finish Line podcast, where I converse with competitive people on how they navigate this competitive world. Today, my guest is Ashton Eaton, a two-time Olympic champion in the Decathlon, a multiple-time world record holder, and multiple-time world champion as well. Since finishing his decathlon career, Ashton moved on to become a builder, where he is now a mechanical engineer at Nike and has also spent time at other big companies such as Intel and smaller companies as well. In this episode, we talk about the definition of competitiveness and how to have a healthy relationship with success. I hope you enjoy this episode with Ashton Eaton. Ashton, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, man. This is going to be awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited. So I kind of want to start out with a quote today, and it's by the founder of the modern Olympics, Pierre de Coubertin, and I have no idea if I pronounced that correctly, but
Sounds good to me.
he said, the important thing in the Olympic Games is not to win, but to take part. Just as the most important thing in life is not the triumph, but the struggle. And from my perspective, within that quote lies an interesting question, which is, what is the definition of competitiveness and success? And I'd love to hear your take on each of these.
Man, Pierre was just like such a visionary. And that's one of my favorite quotes too, because the event that I did, the decathlon, in pretty much every language translates to 10 fights or 10 contests or 10 struggles. Specifically in Germany, Zehnkampf is 10 fights. Those two go hand in hand because what I learned from sport was that in order to grow, you actually have to face challenges. And this is like no different than a little kid learning to walk. It's pretty painful to watch. They stand up, they fall down, they're, kind of crawling around and they have to grab onto something. And it's just like months of this fight to be able to do something to kind of give them the capability to move more freely in the world and like to see things from a different perspective. And sport taught me that and helped me see the other ways that life is like that. And I think that's just like the competition of it. That's the necessary bit for progress. So to me, the definition of competition is, facing this challenge that you haven't yet overcome and trying to move beyond that, knowing that on the other side of it, you're going to be better. I think probably win or lose, success or failure.
That's super interesting because you dive into this definition that, the word competitive and competitiveness, I think by nature, or maybe a better way to phrase it is the word competitiveness or competitive automatically make people think in relation to others.
Right.
And what you just said was in relation to yourself.
Yeah. The decathlon also taught me this because if you look like at a 100-meter dash or a basketball game or a tennis match, it is very much mano a mano. It's us versus them. The decathlon is an event that is made up of 10 events, and you're never going to win all of them. You're going to lose a majority of them, actually. And what you find is, but you still can come out better. A victor on the other side or your personal best at the end of it. And what you realize is this is actually me against me. Even though I do run the 100 and I do the long jump and I do these events against others, what I'm doing is I'm using them to better myself. They're just like a carrot on a stick. Obviously, it would be so unfun and so unproductive for a person to just compete against themselves by themselves in a stadium. There's no excitement. There's just a lot of things missing from that. But when you add other people who are in the same pursuit and are using you to kind of better themselves, then it's just much more exciting. And how that manifests is I may be worse in the shot put than one of my competitors. They may be able to throw way further than me. But if they throw their personal best, I get fired up and I'm like, okay, I want to do that for myself. Or even more tactically, if I know the margin between myself and them should be something like, hey, I'm doing good if I'm within this range to them, knowing that they're better, then I'm doing good. And if I can get that range closer, then I'm like, yes. If I'm further away from that range, I'm like pissed off. And so that's kind of the competitive side. And it's so similar to life because it's never kind of like a one for one. There's always this, where am I to your point, in compared to everybody else. But ultimately, it's about me having some measure by which I feel like I'm moving forward. And it can be an external number or it can be an external kind of inspiration, a person, a thing. So, yeah, sometimes, I'm like, and I think I probably actually took this for granted, but you have to, because maybe it's intrinsic, but the other part of competitiveness is you have to want it. You have to want whatever it is. Fundamentally, physical, philosophically, maybe it's just to get better, progress in some way, shape, or form. And I'm not sure everybody wants that, and that's okay. And maybe those are inherently non-competitive folks. I don't know.
Okay, so really interesting. The carrot on the stick thing was, I want to dive into that a little bit. You said you're looking at someone else and
Hmm.
you're using their success to your advantage almost. And I think a lot of people get hung up on this comparison
Right,
thing. I certainly, over time, when I was swimming, would compare myself to others and just be like, oh, I want
right.
to be better than him rather than I need to be a better version of myself to reach
Mhm.
my potential. So I think the natural thing that humans do is compare. How did you come to say, like, okay, this is going to be a me versus me thing, and I can use these other external things that are completely out of my control, aka this
Right.
person throwing the shot put, throwing their personal best? How did you get to, I'm going to use that to my advantage to better myself and be competitive with myself?
Well, I think it comes down to the rate at which people improve. I wouldn't say not necessarily what they were doing, but it's how fast they were doing it. And this may seem a little bit simple. Sometimes you compare yourself to your peers, people who are, right next to you. But I remember going to college and having people, you're an 18-year-old straight out of high school. And like I didn't lift that much. You're just so underdeveloped as a person. Your body still has a lot to grow, your mind as well. But when you get to college, there's like seniors, there's 22-year-olds who are like grown men and women who are so much more advanced in a lot of ways. The path, like being that young person and seeing those people is just like, I don't even know how to get there. It's just like hard to visualize that. So what I would pay attention to is the rate at which I could make that progress, if that made sense. And so I would see my peers and I would say, am I driving towards that at a slower rate or a faster rate than them? Not are we doing the same things necessarily? It's just the rate at which we are doing them. And so that's when I learned, well, that is something that's a me thing. That's the only thing I can control. And I think that's kind of when I became intrinsically motivated to say, I want to be the person that can go at the fastest rate. So it's this weird thing of like using others, but ultimately it's about the thing that I want to achieve, if you will, and knowing that I'm the only thing in my way. So, for your example with wanting to be like somebody in swimming, it's maybe just a frame of mind thing. Like, yes, they're the ones that you're looking at, but you're the one in control of that, and doing the things that you need to do in order to get there. It's not really about them. It's about you and maybe how you train, how you approach things. So it's kind of like that. I haven't really thought about this. Maybe it's just because I've always been. The thing I'm wondering is like, have I always been this way? It's like a weird dichotomy. I'm extremely competitive, and inherently, I want to win, but I very, very rarely, if ever, say, I want to beat that other person.
Hmm.
Maybe it's this like inaccurate belief that I can beat everyone, you know, like this, because I don't always win, obviously, in
Yeah.
various phases of life, not just sports, but yeah, it's just like this belief that I can, and therefore I try. Yeah, it's a strange thing.
Let's go way back. Like, did you have influence by grandparents in your life?
Mm,
And how did they help you when you were a kid? And how about your parents? How did they make you competitive? And what was uh, your first memory of that feeling of wanting to win?
yeah, man, you're just bringing back a flood of memories. When I was younger, my biggest influence, I grew up in the 90s. My biggest influence was the television. All kids get started in something, some way. And for me, I got started by watching movies. And the thing that I was attracted to in these movies was the way people were moving. Just like action movies, a lot of fight scenes, or you can imagine Jackie Chan doing like really interesting stunts. And maybe it's because I had this natural talent of movement that I just felt like I wanted to try those things. Um, I would see something and then I'd go outside and I'd try to do it and I'd try to replicate it, and like Ninja Turtles and that kind of stuff. My mother, who's a single mother, she and my grandparents, who we spent a lot of time with growing up in Central Oregon, they would see me do these things, especially at a young age, like 4, 5, 6, and they say, okay, we need to get this kid into sports. I think that was like what they saw me doing, was just moving, being active. So the first thing they did was just expose me to things that they thought would be interesting or that I seemed to like, and kind of open these doors. So I did everything. I played baseball, basketball, football, track and field, cross country, martial arts, anything that I kind of felt like I was attracted to, because it was all new. They just opened the door and took me to it. What was really interesting is I remember baseball being kind of the first thing I did, and I think from their perspective, it was like, hey, it's the American sport. It's where we start in the small town. In the small town I grew up in, it's what all the kids were doing. And I remember being on a t-ball team. We were the Chicago Cubs for whatever reason, and I must have been 5 or 6 years old, maybe 7 years old. And I was up. We were hitting off the tee, and that's how we just kind of played our games. And I hit off this tee, and I was like hitting pretty good. Like I just had, it was clear to me, and I think others, that I had the body awareness to just get that done. And then I remember the parents kind of looking at each other and being like, okay, it's time. And they took the tee away. They're like, Ashton, we're gonna like pitch you the ball. And my heart started racing, and it was almost, it's like my most vivid sport memory from my past. But my heart started racing because I was like, I've been waiting for this. Like I've been waiting to do it like the guys on TV. And I remember they pitched this thing underhand, and I just got this feeling that in my body, and I was like, I know I'm going to crush this thing. And almost in slow motion. It was a beautiful sunny day in the summer in Central Oregon. This little soft tee-ball goes flying through the air, and I remember the dad pitching it and his like hand releasing, and I just got back and I swung that bat so freaking hard, and it was like a line drive right down the center over his head, over second base. All the kids were going nuts. I was running around the bases like a maniac.
I can see it, man. I see it right now.
Oh, the dust was flying. It was like, and just when you're asking me this question, those memories flashed in my head. And then I remember shortly after that, my grandmother, who was kind of like just the solid rock, always at home, cooking dinners for us and that kind of thing, when my mom and my grandpa worked. She would take me out in the yard, and she bought little wiffle balls, the golf size ones, not the big ones. And she gave me a broom handle. And leading up to this point, she was basically having me hit golf ball size wiffle balls with a broom handle because it was harder to do. And I'm thinking back, I'm like, yeah, here's this 70-year-old, 10 pound petite woman out there, like getting on my case, like, Ash, man, you got to keep your eye on the ball. Because I would whiff. I was like whiffing all these things. And I could just see now, like, okay, here's this 6-year-old with his grandma, like getting on his case about hitting a wiffle ball with a broom handle. This lady's a maniac. But there was just dedication. There's dedication, there was love, and there was opening doors for opportunities for me in that regard.
And so they fostered an environment for you
Yeah.
to compete with yourself and be better. And do you think that's maybe where it came from?
I think initially this you're getting to the crux of it here, Dave, but I think initially what they were asking me to do, or what they were showing me, was, and I think this is probably true for a lot of, you know, founders and investors relationships, or a coach athlete, or parent child, is they believed in me. They believed that I had a future, or that I could do something better. And they were their actions were showing me or helping me get there. They believed that I could do something that I didn't know or think that I could do. And as I look back and kind of go forward in life, that was a recurring theme for my coaches. They were asking me to do things that I didn't think I could do, but that they thought I could do, that they believed I could do. I think eventually, as I got older into my professional level, um, I had this default where, and this is probably where, like, we're going back to, why did I think I was going to win? Maybe it was because over my whole life, I was continually asked to do things I didn't think I could do, and was surprising myself. And so I kept believing. And then I just got to the point where it was like, I'm not sure if I could do this, but I try anyway, and I might. There's just like this inherent belief that came from just hitting those wiffle balls, and people showing me that love and encouragement and support and that mindset.
It's really beautiful. And it is kind of tying into this theme of success a little bit. Like there's the competitiveness and the ongoing, I want to be better than the last version of myself because I know that I have this, you know, group of people who support me and believe in me. I can do this. But it kind of, as you get to that professional level, you of course need to set goals for yourself and define success. And,
Right.
that's certainly, ubiquitous within the post athletic world, which is what is your goal? How are you going to get there? Blah, blah, blah.
Right.
I'm curious to know what your definition of success is, or maybe what it was back then when you came up with what success was, like when you did a good job. Was it hitting a personal best? And how that has evolved all the way through your professional career and competing in the decathlon and even into now.
Yeah. When I was younger, I think I defined success much like most of the world does, and it was what the achievement was, what the outcome was. Did I get the medal or not? And sport is very, I would say, black and white or linear in that way compared to, business or relationships or life or these other ways. Or even holistically, it's like, what the hell is success? But sport, I adopted the obvious kind of metrics first. Looking back though, and the way I operate now, in my definition now, it's actually much more about progress. It's progress driven. Am I moving forward at a rate that seems reasonable, or not? And if I'm not, I don't think I'm being successful. I don't feel good about, what I'm doing. And so I try harder. And part of the reason I don't have like, yes, there's goals, there's things I strive for, but those aren't an end necessarily. Like if I achieve those things, I just kind of make new ones, And it's like this constant ladder of objectives or this constant moving forward. And I find it hard to define success. And I think this came about as an athlete. I mean, here I was, a 24-year-old, and I broke the world record in the decathlon. And I won the Olympic gold medal in the Olympic, in the Olympic Games. It's like, well, holy hell, what do I do now? And what is defined as success? It's like, okay, well, you're successful in this respect. Should you just stop? These are the questions I was putting through my mind. It's like, well, no, I want to keep going. And so that's when I think adopted kind of that subconscious idea that success is, to me, can I keep moving forward, like until the day I die, basically. The analogy that I draw is actually from video games. When you start out in a video game, you're a level one, and you have level one skills and level one abilities and level one knowledge, and you kind of just hang out in your little level one zone and do all the things required in that zone. But the idea is like, hey, we want to get to level two, and in order to get to level two, you have to do all the level one stuff to be prepped to move into level two. If you're level one, you can't like go to level five because you just get destroyed instantly. You don't have the tools necessary to be able to handle that environment and the things in it. And so I saw that, like sport is like this in a lot of ways, life is like this. But the question is, when you're playing a game, when you get to it's like, hey, the game comes out, you can get to level 100, and then they always come out with an expansion pack. And it's like, well, now the new level is 150, and now the new level is 200. You're like, well, what's the point of this freaking game? I just keep like advancing in levels. Well, that is the point. I think the point, like, if you get to a game where it's level 100 and that's it, and they don't make any more, game over. No more fun. No more growing and learning and exploring and getting new skills and abilities and new relationships and all this stuff. And so, to me, that is kind of success, continuing to progress through however many levels life has for us, individually and collectively, and never having the game be over. And so in sport, to me, it was like, I'm going to push this thing as far as I can, regardless of the medals and my placement of things. My goal actually is continual progress until I feel like, I can't make it anymore. And so that's why I actually retired. My rate was slowing down. I think I had gotten to a point where I pushed the limit as far as I could, taking into context that life is short, and I wanted to try to do this same thing in other fields.
Yeah. So first of all, what game, has influenced your thinking here, or what was like your game growing up, or as an
Yeah.
adult?
I think any game I played, Mario, I'm a 90s kid, so Super Mario Brothers, you can go through these levels, but I remember you could get like this little secret whistle and kind of jump levels, but it was like way harder.
Mm,
Yeah. What other games? I grew up playing Halo and just like first person shooters with my friends.
nice.
Yeah, some of the online ones, I think I played Morrowind or something back in the day.
Okay. It wasn't like
Yeah.
RuneScape or World of Warcraft or any of those mainstream ones.
No, like the one that would I think be the most applicable to this is like Diablo or something.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you keep going to these levels, it gets harder. You keep getting more skills, they keep adding more stuff. Yeah.
So the reason why I asked was to see if I could draw an analogy or maybe reference part of the game. So in the Assassin's Creed games and like Skyrim or the Elder
Yeah, I love
Scrolls
Skyrim.
games or
Right.
those. So in Skyrim specifically, and for those listening who don't know Skyrim, go check it out. It's an amazing,
Oh, it's so good. Bethesda
RPG. It's
Softworks made great
yeah,
games.
yeah. And what they have is this thing called a skill tree.
Hmm.
And you have to basically decide when you reach another level, what skill do you want to unlock? And then you also need to kind of go and look at what are all the skills further down the skill tree that I want to unlock later on, and then
Yep.
figure out how do I allocate my energy appropriately to go and
Yep.
get those skills. So for the first and better part of your life to date, first 28 years, I think,
Yep.
was pretty solely focused on the decathlon and like, hey,
Right.
I want to go and get this Olympic gold medal, and then I want to be a
Mhm.
repeat to prove that I'm legit. If that wasn't enough, maybe that's the reason. But then you're like, okay, now I'm not learning fast enough, or I'm not growing fast enough that rate. So let's jump into another skill tree. Or is that the right analogy to draw? Or maybe you can talk to me about, you know, how you're deciding, okay, I need to expand. Maybe there was like an itch to
Right.
that you wanted to scratch in another world. And then what was the rate at the
Yeah.
Olympic level that you were like, I'm not going fast enough now?
Yeah. I mean, I think the number one thing that helps me make decisions is how much time I believe I have left in life. I kind of break things up into thirds about. So, and I think it was mostly just because I ended my track career around 30. And I was like, okay, I spent the first third, assuming like, I lived till 90, doing this sport thing. And maybe I have another third left to like do something else useful in the world. And yeah, part of that was I've done this thing for a while. What else is there in the world? And yeah, I was like slowing down in my advancement from a sport perspective. I didn't think that I was, with another 4 years of training or what have you, going to be able to push the limit that much more because my body is a limiting factor in sport. And as you get older, it deteriorates. It's just a fact of biology. And so I was like, okay, I want to do more things anyway, or do other things. And so I always had this admiration for people who built stuff. And that came about just by saying, this house that I live in, and the way that it gets water through the piping that goes through like the city streets all the way to the wastewater treatment plant, and the electricity that comes from the power plant that goes through the wires. It's like, how did all that just get built? And so I became super curious about how things were built for a couple years after sport, and ultimately realized I want to be a person who, in some way, makes a material impact on society. And I think I was swinging the pendulum super far this way because in sport, at the end of my career, I was asking myself, what have I done? Sport is so abstract. I think the main thing people can point to is inspire. You can inspire people to, well, you can just inspire people in many ways that are unique to them. Uh, and it's kind of, for me, it's very intangible. Every so often I'll meet folks and they'll say, man, you inspired me so much. And I appreciate that because it, it means a lot to have my effort in life mean something to somebody. But in the back of my mind, I think, inspired you to do what though? For some reason, I don't ever ask this question, maybe because I'm like afraid of the answer,
Mhm.
but like just inspiring is a little bit intangible, if that makes sense. Sometimes, kids come up to me and they say, I got started in sport or the decathlon because of you. And I'm like, that's really cool. Because
Yeah.
I know the kind of things I can bring. So anyway, yeah, I swung hard more to material impact and physical things in the world. And so I decided to study mechanical engineering. And I think the skill tree part of it was, yeah, I'm looking forward to the future and seeing maybe somebody who has achieved the things or is producing the things or is in a field that I find interesting or has a skill set that I admire. And I thought about just putting myself in the environments or the levels or the locations necessary to be able to get those. And so part of that was moving to Silicon Valley. Part of that was going back to school in my mid 30s to learn mechanical engineering, and spending basically the last 6, 7 years doing that.
So you're on top of the world, really. 28. You've won the decathlon twice, and then you're like, okay, I maybe I can do something more useful in this second third of my life. You built up this confidence, or maybe you
Right,
have innate confidence where you're just like, okay,
right,
I've proven to myself that I can do this
right.
incredible thing. And you've seen success out of that. You've seen your rate increase of learning. You've seen, you're unlocking skills in that skill tree. You're winning against
Yeah.
yourself, against others. And
Well,
then, of
so the
course,
rate thing, and sorry to interrupt. Don't forget what you were going to
good,
say.
you're good.
The rate thing, as you're saying that, it's like I saw myself, and I actually never planned this. I think this is just me being aware of it. It's like I saw myself compared to other 28, 30-year olds in my life be like, oh man, in some ways, I'm like ahead of the game here from maybe like a networking perspective or a financial perspective or like a notoriety perspective, like people knew my name. And so to that point of rate, it's like I saw that and I also thought, okay, it's important to leverage this and keep that momentum going in a different field.
Okay, that was partially answering my
Yeah.
next question here, which
Okay.
is with this confidence also comes like a sense of ego that it's like, okay, I'm great. I struggled to kind of get rid of mine, and I still struggle occasionally. And like I think we're all just going to have this
Yeah.
little bit of,
You
I
should
don't
keep
know if
it.
it's yeah, to a degree, right? It's helpful sometimes, but I struggled with was I was one of the best swimmers in the world, certainly in the country. And then I went to, oh, wow, I am one of the worst professionals in existence because I have no
Right.
experience. And
Right.
you said, okay, I'm going to go and study mechanical engineering and follow curiosity. There's no way that you jumped in and you knew everything about, fluid mechanics right off the bat or structural mechanics, dynamics, any of that stuff. So
Right.
did you struggle at all with like this sense of, hey, I did this great thing. I rose to the top and now I got to go jump to the bottom? Or do you use that as a ramp, your notoriety,
Right.
to kind of accelerate that rate at which you could learn and
I think from a practical perspective, when I decided to go to school and do that, I was actually, I was in the classroom just like anybody else. And there was nothing I did there to, try to make that whole thing go faster. It actually took a long time because of COVID for several reasons. But in that respect, I actually wanted to learn the fundamentals as best as I could. And I think it was more like, okay, maybe in this domain, I'm like a level one again. And how do I kind of level myself up as fast as possible? But outside of just learning this new knowledge, it was understanding that I have a networking connections and what do I do once I gain this skill set and go off and work at a company or start my own or do those kinds of things. And so that took more of that momentum from sport, which is networking, letting people know what I was going to do. Actually exploring more of what's possible in these fields and what I might be interested in. Because to your point, it very much was retired January 2017 after Rio. I was like, okay, what do I know? Not a lot. Um, I've never been in an office setting. Like, holy crap, I did feel like I was starting over again. I felt like the high school athlete joining the college track team and just being super behind and everybody being like stronger, faster, better. But much like that college situation, it was just like, okay, how fast can I get it done here? What are the fundamentals? What can I learn? And so part of that was putting myself in a really intense environment to help grow those things and increase that rate. That's I think kind of like what I was saying in the beginning, which is when you can challenge yourself, I think you grow faster and better. And I just threw myself into Silicon Valley knowing nothing and knowing nobody. Being in that environment, even for a few years, was just extremely helpful. It's like you go through levels 1 through 5, I think, so much faster than anywhere else in the world, at least at that time before COVID. So, yeah, doing that is what and was super beneficial.
so it's interesting. Like it's kind of the carrot on the stick, that using the other people to allow you to narrow your focus and move forward and get to that level 5. It's kind of what I'm hearing is like I'm going to go and just jump in the deep end of the pool, and I'm going to see what all the best people are doing, get splashed a ton from every direction, and like see if I can swim.
I mean, Yeah, you brought up the idea of, ego and confidence. It's hard to say. Like, you'd probably have to ask other people who know me, and I'd have to ask like your friends and your family about you. 'Cause I'm not sure I can give a super accurate assessment of myself in that regard, but I can say that I believe I'm mostly driven intrinsically. Like, I want to know stuff and I want to do stuff. And however that manifests itself in my character, I think you just get the sense that it's more about that learning and that advancement personally than it is, about, like I say, showing it to others. And maybe the decathlon taught me this. There's not a lot of Usain Bolts or Noah Lyles in the decathlon, and not that those are bad. Like, I think those are actually really good. These characters that bring out the sport, that bring out the emotion, that make it a show. We in our sport are very much more, I think, intrinsically driven and motivated. We like to share our successes with people, but we are also humbled all the time by losing, even when we kind of do win. And so yeah, it's kind of like that for me. It's, man, do I want to excel and advance, but I don't think I'm very vocal about it. And maybe that doesn't, it comes across as not having that much of an ego. Maybe, I don't know.
Well, let's talk for a second about losing and maybe failure. Like, you probably don't know much about this at all, but I'm curious to hear your definition of what losing is.
Yeah. Um,
Is
it's
it
one of the
the
best.
opposite of the success and the rate and being better than yourself? Is it just like not making progress, or is it different than that?
No, I think it's one of the most important components to progress. I think it's actually necessary to make even more progress. Unfortunately, I think semantically, our definition of losing failure it's just hard to, I think, reframe. And when you listen to podcasts or read books or just anything that is kind of like a self-help on how to deal with failure, it seems like the number one piece of advice is reframe what you believe failure is. And to me, the core principle that I learned from sport and that I think is getting expressed here through all this is struggle causes growth and vice versa. Growth is a struggle. And how that manifests itself is continual failure and learning in every attempt. Like, you basically just try things and they either go well or they don't. And you're learning from each one of those data points. And you kind of learn more from the ones that don't work out. Um, and so it's just so it's necessary. And like the vice versa part of that struggle equals growth. Growth is a struggle. Is super important. Like, you cannot grow without it. You cannot have one without the other, in my opinion. And yeah, the thing that's hard is I look at school and I look at sport and how different they are with how they handle and communicate failure and growth and progress. In academics, in the classroom, you learn material. So you kind of, all right, I'm getting smarter, I'm getting better. And then you get tested. When you get tested, you make errors, and those errors get a big red mark through them. And you basically get back a document that says, this is you. And then you move on to the next thing. In sport, you do the same thing. You learn stuff, you get tested through competition or like whatever, and you get this result. But then what happens next is totally different. Rather than moving on to like in academics, what would be more like sport is if you got your test back and then you got to retry those things again, knowing like, oh, here's where I messed up. But you don't. You just move on. It's like, this is you, rather than you tried it. This is what happened. Can you get better? Like, what's actually more you is what do you do when you're trying to get better? Like, how much better do you get? And that's what sport is about, if that makes sense. It's like there's no red slash that just shows you failed in these things. It's actually you failed in these things. What can you do to correct them? How good are you at learning? How good are you at handling that failure, that challenge, and then what are you doing to correct it and get better at it? Um, and so those two things are like always had so much trouble in the classroom, with I think confidence actually and ego and the things I had really a strong hold on in sport, because in sport it was just so much more intuitive and natural and I think better and more applicable to life than it was in the classroom, because the world isn't like that necessarily. In some respects, yeah, you like go build a bridge and if it doesn't work, people die. But you do a lot of testing and a lot of iteration to get there. It's not like you have to build the bridge right the first time and then see what happens. Like, that's kind of, to me, a little bit more the failure that people I think ascribe to failure, rather than the failure of we tried, we failed, we're iterating, we're getting better.
Yeah, building a healthy feedback loop
Right.
paramount to having this work properly. And I'm assuming it's extremely easy for you, almost intuitive. You just did the 100 meter, or the shot put, or the javelin, whatever. The four things that could have been done better almost
Yep.
immediately. And
Yep.
instead of like sitting around moping about like, oh man, I didn't do well, I didn't get the. You're like, I have four action items. How am I going to go and improve these four things, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
In career or kind of beyond sport, it's pretty similar in that there are tests, but they're not like intense tests. Looping it back to the whole competitiveness in the arena, you're not standing up and giving a huge presentation as someone who's not the CEO of a company. So,
Right.
how do you set up that healthy feedback mechanism beyond sport?
I mean, I would say the number one thing that I do is sport was easy to your point because it's very defined, and very obvious what I think the metrics are for success. You can measure that progress, like your times gets faster or your distances get further, so you can know I'm moving forward in the right direction here. In life, it is more challenging, and I've asked this of a bunch of people, and I think everybody comes to the conclusion that you have to do it yourself. You have to set the things that you believe are success metrics for yourself. And for me personally, it's again, I think that rate, if you will. And I think maybe people listening will be like, dude, this rate thing is like insanely annoying. Why does he keep saying that? But and I maybe yeah, I think what it's about is like at my age or at my level of the level I'm at in my knowledge and experience, like where am I compared to my peers? Where am I in comparison to where I want to be, and the people kind of moving in that direction. And so my success metric is like, am I moving at minimum as fast, if you will, as I think I should be, or that others are, or that those who have done it well in the past are.
There's hold on, Ashton. Sorry, there's a really key point in there, which is not like, am I where my peers are on stage in this moment, this snapshot. It's, am I where my peers are in building and moving at a speed? Like the other, how old are you? 37,
But yeah,
36?
36. Yeah,
36. So like you're not looking at 36-year-olds taking a snapshot and saying, where are all the 36-year-olds who are my age in terms of, what their titles are, but you're saying like, okay, their title is a mechanical engineer. What are they building right now? How fast are they at, scoping? How good are they at working with the team? And how much are they improving that over time? Is that kind of what you're
yep,
talking about with the rate thing?
exactly.
Okay.
And it's much like a decathlon. I know I'm not going to win every event. I know I'm not going to be like the best or good at all these things. So part of this is me figuring out, what are my skill sets? In the decathlon and sport, it was very obvious. I was like the speed guy and the jumping guy, and the throws are things that I was not that good at that I need to work on or just like keep at a minimum level. And in the workplace and in the world where you're trying to produce products and services that matter, it's kind of like, yeah, where am I in this, and what skill sets do I have, and how fast am I moving forward relative to others? And not everybody wants this. Like maybe the people listening to this podcast are like founders, entrepreneurs, or investors. That group of folks, I think they want it. They want to move forward. They like progress. It like feels good for whatever reason. They like leveling up in the video game because they're curious about the world and what more we can do and how we can expand. Or they're just, at the core of it, philanthropic and want to produce something that helps people, and they can like be on their deathbed happy about it. Yeah, so like for me, I think it's all those things. And I think rate also matters because it's like, how far can you go? Like nobody actually knows the question. How high of a, if the video game is 2,000 levels and we're in society and civilization on like level 100, it's like, well, hell, how do we get there quicker?
Mm.
And I think this is why people admire folks like the Musks and the Jobs and the other people of the world, because they're like, man, they're advancing the level super fast to like a really cool place, and we're learning so much more about this game of life, and the universe just because of it. And so, yeah, still long-winded answer, the same thing. And I mean that comes back to my inherent competitiveness. It's like Dave, I always have this sense of um, unease, I would say, this sense of it's I don't want to call it anxiety, but stress. And it's a very similar type of stress that I remember feeling before I would start a competition. 2 days before, 3 days before, the day of, getting in the blocks, getting ready. It's like I am wanting to compete, but I'm feeling Like I don't know. I like want to see where I am, if you will. Like I want to feel like I'm behind. I want to like get on the competition floor and get that feedback and understand. And so yeah, I think maybe because my age and starting this type of career later, I just feel behind and constantly want to move forward faster.
Yeah, I think the focusing on rate and what you can do and what are the controllables that you have are is like
Right.
the most important thing there. And how do you currently treat your day to day like a competition? Do you look at it every day as being practice, or do you set like over this quarter or over this year I want to do this thing? Are you still whole quads
Yeah.
mentality?
You know, I find breaking up my life into Olympiads actually extremely useful.
Dude, I do too.
Yes.
I never made it,
I
but I do too.
No, it's good. It's good. I actually find treating my life, basically maintaining that athlete mindset and framing things like that, where I break the year down into phases and wanting to be in like a specific spot by specific phase, having kind of milestones, if you will, to like see, am I improving at the rate that I think is good for these things? I mean, that the whole way sport is structured, like sport is such a freaking good analogy for life in just so many ways. So I continue to use it as the framework and the lessons from it in that way. And I treat every day like training and driving towards competitions. And a competition might be, like, for example, I'm working on a project right now where we have things that we're trying to do, trying to get them done quickly, push ourselves. And the competition is going to be like, hey, we're going to deliver this demo to somebody and see if we can take it to the next level, because it has to kind of be, let's say, sold internally or like or whatever it is. And so yeah, I break things down into quarters, into months. This is our base phase, this is our technical phase, this is our competition phase, and do things like that. And it's just really helpful. I wake up with that kind of athlete mindset. And sometimes I go home and like, man, practice was bad today.
Yeah.
And I am like pissed off at myself and we did not make any progress and I didn't learn anything. I just came home frustrated. And in those days, it's like hard to understand, like, what did I learn? It just feels like a waste and all that stuff. So that happens just like it did in sport. But just like in sport, it's like, got to get your crap together and got to make the next day better. And yeah,
That resilience, the ability to bounce back the next day, I think is something that it differentiates greats from the people who are good.
right.
Is I here's that thing that I messed up on today. I remember
Yeah.
Phelps would show up to practice the next morning, like it, he would use that as one of those carrots on
Yeah.
the stick to be like, I'm going to do so much better because yesterday was so bad. And if he had
Yeah.
two bad days in a row, that third day, you just saw like a new level of athlete just pop
Exactly.
out. It's like, holy shit.
You know,
um,
something to close on for this rate thing is an age-old debate on who the best athlete in the world is. And the reason I think rate matters so much, this idea of talent. Like, what is talent? And in general, I believe people think talent is the maximum somebody can achieve. So people look like a LeBron or Tiger or Serena, and they'll say, man, they're talented just because of how purely good they are, their level. When my opinion is that argument without rate is actually, let me put it this way, the argument with rate is actually much stronger in my opinion. And here's what I would say. To find out who the best athlete in the world is, what you would do is set up like five unique physical activities and you would level them 1 to 10. And so progressively, they would get much more difficult. And you can imagine, like, maybe we ask a bunch of people to do some kind of gymnastics move, and the level 10 is like Simone Biles or even further than that level. And the idea would be who can not only get to the highest level, but how fast do they get there? Because somebody might get super fast to level 5, but then that's their ceiling. They like can't do the level 6 thing. Or somebody might be slower, but take it all the way to level 10. So I believe it's actually about rate and range as to um, how you measure things. And so the rate thing is never really talked about. But I think when you look at LeBron, you're like, that guy's talented. It's like, yeah, he was so good, so fast, and he had high level. Like, that's talent. You can look at it as like, is he better than Michael Jordan? It's like, well, Jordan took a longer time, to get
yeah,
there.
that's interesting. I don't know if I totally agree
Okay.
because which is, you're obviously probably better suited to
No,
come
this is
up with
good.
the experiment than I am.
Critical feedback is good.
duration in the game type of thing is part
Right.
of the performance overseeing the greatest. You know, the LeBron versus Michael Jordan thing
I
specifically.
see.
LeBron's been in the game for so long and he's been competing at this insane level. Obviously,
Right.
Jordan was more dominant during his era in life, or I guess in how you're creating for the world. It's really great to do like a short spurt of things and then be done. Like you can still have way more reach and have way more success,
Mm,
but there are people out there who are generating goodness for 60, 70-year careers because they
yeah,
prioritize
it's
their
true.
health and they're just going, going, going. Now, how full someone is a function of the amount of time that they're being helpful and the level of helpfulness that they are contributing. But time is a really important factor in that. And
Makes sense. I think it's a merger of both. Yeah, it's good.
yeah. Okay, cool. So thank you. I would
Dude,
love to do this quick finisher exercise
let's
where I
do it.
just go
Let's
through
do
a
it.
couple rapid fire questions. All right, great. Number one, what's your morning routine?
I wake up at 5 or 5:15. I lift, or work out, less I should say, for an hour. And then I help my wife get the kids ready for school. And hopefully we're out of the door by 7:45. And then I'm off to work.
No coffee?
Oh, you know what? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I do eat
Oh,
breakfast
interesting.
when I get the kids' stuff ready for school. But yeah, I love coffee, but I try to, minimize, not drink it so much. But yeah, coffee, breakfast, for sure.
Okay. Sorry, I'm going on a tangent now. Do you work out fasted in the morning?
Fasting, yeah, I don't eat before. Mostly just because I'm not. I know maybe there's like physiological benefit or non-benefit, but it's purely just um, I'm not gonna eat that early, and I'd rather do it later.
Okay. On that topic, next question. What's your go-to comfort food?
Oh my goodness, probably burger and fries.
Oh, yeah. From where?
I mean, it honestly doesn't matter. It's not like McDonald's or anything, but like any restaurant that has a good. And I remember being an athlete and just I couldn't wait till competition season was over because I'd just go get a burger and fries somewhere. Oh my God.
It's a really good one. Okay, next one. Can you name a book that has significantly impacted your life?
Yeah, several. I would say the first is Cosmos by Carl Sagan.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
Yeah. He had a philosophical vision of the world, this cosmic perspective that was very spiritual, but also rooted in somewhat objectivity with science and that. So it helped me frame a worldview that I think is good.
I love it. If you could teleport to any place in the world right now, where would it be and why?
I would probably teleport to, this is might seem strange. I'd probably teleport to like the whole Israel Gaza area. And part of the reason is because I have no semblance of how people, what life is like in conflict regions of the world. And I feel like I just live on this surface level of society where, I wake up every day and things are good. And it almost seems like those other things aren't real, but they're extremely real. And I feel like I'd just be so much more aware and open and probably enlightened as a person if I um, experience those things firsthand.
That's very noble and probably the best answer that I've heard to that question. Uh, so next question, I would, we can do a million podcast episodes just on that topic, but we'll
Right.
move on. Do you have like a single mental model or principle that
Yeah.
has been super, super helpful to you? What is it?
Yeah. My guiding principle is know, think, choose, do.
No, think, choose, do.
Yeah. Not know, but like learn, think, choose, do. And do that as quickly as possible.
Okay.
And so the reason that's my mental model is because it's the first step is learn as much as possible. Like grow your understanding of the world. Then the think part is we don't have all the answers. And so you have to, as a person in life, we have to make a judgment on the things that we learn. And so you can imagine me going teleporting into the Middle East somewhere and not knowing like what the heck to do or how I feel about things and just this big experience. I'd have to use my mind to like come to a judgment about a lot of things. And so that's the think part. And then choose. It's like, am I going to act on this or not? We have to make decisions in life. Like ultimately, humans act and we move forward. But in order, the thing that precedes action is a decision. So make a decision, and then do is just act. And I think once you act and you have a bias for action, then you kind of always go back to the loop of learn or know. You're going to know and learn something different, and then you just keep that cycle going. That's
Oh yeah,
how
dude.
that's how I make progress.
That's a fantastic one. Okay. Favorite song of all time?
This is terrible. This is my favorite song of all time. You know what? All time, I don't know. But Right now, I'd say the most consistent song I've listened to for like the past 7 years is called Ancora by Ludovico Einaudi, who's this pianist, like contemporary pianist. It's just such a good, yeah, I don't know, it's great.
Okay, I'm gonna go and look at that one. Anacora, you
Yeah.
said?
Ancora Ludovico Einaudi. It's like a
Okay.
12-minute piano song.
It sounds like a, shut your eyes, have a candle going, headphones on
Yeah,
kind of thing.
yeah, I listen to it a lot when I run. But honestly, it makes me think about life. It has like this build up and this down and this. I'm like, this is like a really interesting. I don't know.
That's really cool. Okay, three more. One, what famous person or historical figure would you have lunch with if you could? One of those burgers and
Thomas Edison.
fries.
Yeah,
Thomas
Thomas
Edison.
Edison.
He's a builder. Okay, I love it.
My God, I just you talk about rate and range. That guy was a maniac, especially
Yeah,
in his time when there was like no digital communication. The things he got done were astounding.
yeah, I agree. Two more. What's the best way to get out of a rut?
Act,
That's perfect.
just
Just do.
100% act.
Yeah.
Yeah, just do it.
Okay. And I'm not sure if you've listened to Patrick O'Shaughnessy's podcast, but he asked this question and I love it. What's the kindest
Yeah,
thing anyone has ever done for you?
man.
Was it your grandma with a broomstick and wiffle balls?
Kindest thing. God, what are some of the answers? It's just hard, you know? I think the kindest thing. Oh, I'm gonna think about this all day. Dang, you just killed me. I think the kindest thing anybody's ever done for me is probably, I would probably have to say my track coaches in high school and at the University of Oregon. Not to discredit anybody else in my life, but people know me today as like I'm a thing sometimes in people's minds who know track. And I think the reason is because there was people who believed that I could do something, and they were the ones. They're the ones that took a shot and a chance. And it always gets me fired up because I think about potential in people. And if nobody had helped me find mine, it just wouldn't be, who I am. Or I would not have discovered those things about myself that I could do. And I'm so grateful because a lot of people in life don't. They have something and they just never get to find it. And I got to find mine in sport. And it's because of these other people.
Beautiful, man. I
Oh,
can't think of a better. I know there are so many good answers, but you probably said that one because this was something that happened over years. Every single day, these coaches were there. They were believing in you, and that had compounding effects, and ultimately made the top of the kindest things list.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, Ashton, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate
Dude,
it.
likewise. You're awesome, man. You're giving athletes and other people voice, telling their stories, and it's super important. So thank you.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Beyond the Finish Line podcast and this conversation with Ashton. If you like the episode, please like, subscribe, and share. And thanks for tuning in.